after he left office. The case has also set a global precedent as the first time a country has prosecuted a former leader of another nation for rights abuses. African Union Commission Chief Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma said the verdict is a vivid demonstration that the AU does not condone impunity and human rights violations. And for more on this, we are now joined on the line by Otilia Maunganidze, and she is a senior researcher from the Institute for Security Studies. Otilia, thanks so much for your time and welcome. In your view, just how significant was this conviction of Hissene Habre by an African Union-backed court in Senegal?
It was extremely significant as for the reasons that you pointed out, it being the first prosecution of a former head of state by another African court is something that we cannot underemphasize. At the same time, it speaks to the role that victims have in terms of pushing for justice, and really it speaks to the fact that much as sometimes critics may say that victims don't necessarily want justice, this trial would not have happened were it not for them.
But the question then is, could this be the beginning of this quest for a permanent forum for justice in Africa?
Yes and no. Yes, because what it has shown is, at least it has shown commitment on the part of Senegal to bring to book Hissene Habre for the crimes committed in Chad, but at the same time, the proposed permanent African court that would be dealing with international crimes takes away immunity, or rather provides for immunity for heads of state as well as senior government officials. Now, in handing down the decision in this Hissene Habre matter, the Judge President emphasized that Hissene Habre was a dictator, first and foremost, but that he created a culture of impunity for 8 years. The question then is, must we wait until people are out of office before they're held to account for that culture of impunity that they create?
But in your view, what's the general feeling on the continent around that? Should we really wait until heads of state are out of office in order to prosecute them?
Views are divided. So you have people more on the legal as well as victim side who do not think that justice is something that must be delayed. However, on the more political side of the fence, you do have people who believe that arresting or even charging a sitting head of state goes against a state sovereignty. And so it's a divided conversation depending on who you speak to about this. But I think if we take the Hissene Habre process as an example, it did take 26 years before this person was held to account. And if the reactions from people in Senegal, in Chad, are anything to go by, this was a long time coming, and yet people still celebrated. But many were saying it would have been wonderful if this justice was served sooner rather than later.
But now, do you think, Otilia, that this case may also galvanize the calls by many leaders, particularly from Africa, to leave the International Criminal Court?
I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is because the Extraordinary African Chambers was an ad hoc tribunal like the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda or the Special Court for Sierra Leone with a very specific mandate. And it was dealing with crimes that were committed before even the jurisdiction of the ICC. And the way in which the ICC is meant to operate is that it's meant to operate as a court for last resort. So countries that support the International Criminal Court, for example, would likely still remain because they would still insist that domestic processes come first, and only if those fail do they then refer matters to the ICC. So the ICC won't be and shouldn't be the court of first instance. And so countries that support the ICC will likely remain. Countries that don't support the ICC might see this as a sign that African countries can do these prosecutions themselves.
But now, do you see this case as being a deterrent for the serving African leaders now, in that they will look at it and say, if I'm not prosecuted now, at least I will be prosecuted when I leave office? Will this be seen as a deterrent in stopping or curbing human rights abuses on the continent?
Unlikely, because like I pointed out, Hissene Habre was convicted 26 years after he had been in exile in Senegal. Now, if we look at the average age of our current heads of state, if it takes 26 years to prosecute them, chances are they will have passed away before processes to prosecute begin. And so the problem, and this is a debate that's also ongoing, is where a head of state then sees that if he leaves office or if she leaves office, that they may face prosecution, then they will decide to remain in office by any means necessary. So we are seeing a trend of constitutional amendments to extend terms in office across the African continent. And perhaps one of the reasons is that holding to account a head of state while they're in office is something that's unpopular by African leaders, but holding them to account after they leave office is an option. So instead of deterring them from committing crime, they would rather remain in office.
All right, thank you so much for your time. That was Otilia Maungani, the senior researcher from the Institute for Security Studies. Now, the United Nations Children's Fund has delivered on its promise to